Today on Cityline, a new legal challenge to race-conscious college admissions and an ABC News special on a man convicted and now exonerated for the murder of Malcolm X. Good afternoon. I'm Karen Holmes Ward. Later in the program, the Huntington Theater's stage adaptation of a classic, Toni Morrison's debut novel, The Bluest Eye. But first, the future of affirmative action in higher education is now in question. This past week, the Supreme Court agreed to take on a legal challenge to Harvard's and the University of North Carolina's admissions programs. The Supreme Court has weighed in on college admissions several times. The current dispute is closer to its first big affirmative action case in 1978. When Justice Lewis Powell set out the rationale for considering race as a factor, even as the court barred the use of racial quotas in admissions. The challenge against Harvard claims that race-conscious admissions hurt Asian American applicants. The group Color Us United supports the challenge and advocates for a race-blind America.
An Asian American has to score 440 points higher on the SAT to have the same chance of admission as a Black person, 150 points higher to have the same chance of admission as a white person. An Asian American, if they weren't discriminated on the basis of race, would make up 43% of Harvard's student body. That's according to Harvard's own.
In a statement, Harvard says it does not discriminate based on race, adding, quote, the Supreme Court decision to review the unanimous decisions of the lower federal courts puts at risk 40 years of legal precedent, granting colleges and universities the freedom and flexibility to create diverse campus communities. Considering race as one factor among many in admissions decisions produces a more diverse student body, which strengthens the learning environment for all, unquote. A coalition of students who previously testified in support of Harvard's policy agrees. Now, joining me to discuss the case is Ivan Espinosa Madrigal of Lawyers for Civil Rights. Their organization represents students of color at Harvard and presented oral arguments at the district court and First Circuit level. Ivan, welcome.
Thank you very much, Karen, for having me here.
So Harvard says that race is not a large factor in admissions, but if race were not weighted, the number of Black and Hispanic students on campus would be cut by half?
Well, it really it's challenging to talk about this in terms of percentages because that's not the way the admissions process works at the university level. As you were explaining and teeing up the segment, there are no quotas, which means that there are no particular percentages that are attached to any student population. Universities right now, like Harvard, use a complex formula, a holistic assessment that really takes into consideration not just test scores and grades, but also lived experiences. What are the attributes that candidates are bringing to campus? How are they going to enrich the academic and student life? And that complexity is extraordinarily difficult to quantify. And that's why universities like Harvard need to have room to be able to be creative in combining the strongest possible students on campus so that they learn with and from each other.
But Ivan, many are concerned. Is the Supreme Court's interest in taking this case perhaps a strong suggestion that there may be a majority on the court who are in favor of eliminating the use of race in college admissions altogether?
It could be. It could be, Karen. It's difficult to read the tea leaves here, but one fundamental point is that the court has grown increasingly conservative over the years. Nevertheless, there have been many victories that have been possible at the Supreme Court, even in its current composition. And so it's important to go with an open mind to the Supreme Court, where we're going to make the strongest possible arguments at Lawyers for Civil Rights to be able to defend diversity in higher education. This is something that really lifts all boats. It makes the learning experience of our children so much richer to be able to have people who are different from them sitting next to them in class or learning virtually, as the case may be. But it is critical that we think about diversity as a plus, as something that benefits not just universities and classrooms, but workplaces and corporate America. And so fundamentally here, we need to be in the defense of diversity in all of its forms. And that is exactly what Lawyers for Civil Rights will be doing in the Supreme Court in this case and beyond.
Let me share this information with you and have you react to it. A Pew Research Center survey in 2019 found that 73% of Americans said colleges and universities should not consider race or ethnicity when making decisions about student admissions. Are you surprised at that high number in this Pew study?
I think it's challenging, again, to think through these type of polls because of the misconceptions that apply to affirmative action. When you say to somebody, should there be affirmative action, what they're thinking about are really outdated ways of how race used to be taken into account. As we've been talking, race is one factor. Just like a student's athletic performance, being a concert pianist, coming from Wyoming, would all be factors that a university takes into account in the admissions process. And so I think when we talk about these polls, there's a lot of misunderstanding or misconception of exactly how the admissions formula works. This is more of an art than a science. And it's difficult to capture that when we're polling Americans, and also difficult to capture that when we're trying to quantify what percentage of the class should be of any particular background. That's not really the way it works. But most understandings of diversity are stuck in that outdated, that old school mentality that really doesn't reflect where race and diversity are today in America.
We have a statement from the Coalition for a Diverse Harvard, which represents diverse student graduates, professors, administrators at Harvard. They say in their statement, a ruling against race-conscious admissions would set the goal of equity in education back decades. It would further limit the opportunities of marginalized students and communities, including Asian Americans. We wanted to get that statement in. You know, Ivan, I want to ask you about this, though. While opposition exists to race-conscious admissions policies, are there other groups that receive preferential consideration for admission? For instance,
thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Karen, for asking. Absolutely. We are spending so much time talking about race and identity when we are not talking about other student populations that receive significant advantages in university admissions processes. What about athletes? What about legacies? People who are the children of graduates, of alums, who receive a significant leg up in the admissions criteria. Now, when we talk about athletes and special performance, when we talk about legacies, and usually the affluence that they bring to the table, nobody's talking about how that is taking away opportunities from other people. And yet we target race as if it's the only criteria that's taken into admissions factors. So this myth that students of color are taking seats away from qualified students is completely not borne out by the fact. And if we want to talk about students who are taking seats that should be democratized, that should be available based on merit, we should be talking about eliminating preferences in admissions for legacy and for athletics.
Okay, Ivan Espinosa Madrigal from the Lawyers for Civil Rights. Thanks for joining us to give us an update, and we'll ask you back as this case progresses. Up next, ABC's Soul of the Nation digs into the murder of Malcolm X and the 55 years it took to find justice for the men wrongfully convicted for the assassination. ABC's Byron Pitts retraces Malcolm X's tragic 1965 assassination, Abdul Aziz's decades behind bars and on parole, and the devastating impact on Aziz's family in Exonerated. That's next on Cityline.